Well, government ministers have agreed to back amendments to its illegal immigration bill in efforts to ward off its latest party rebellion. They relate to a change which will mean that the judges are no longer able to block migrant deportations. The changes will give the Home Secretary the power to disregard interim Rule 39 orders from the Strasbourg Court as European Court of Human Rights, of course. Well, of course. This comes just after a year since the government's £140 million Rwanda deportation scheme was announced, and in that time, precisely 0 people have successfully been deported from the country. Well, join me now with international human rights lawyer David Haigh. Hello there, David. So talk us through this breakthrough. A lot of people out there were thinking some common sense prevailing at last.
Well, it's the never-ending. Good afternoon, Martin. It's a never-ending, I think, story of the Tory party's attempts to win votes effectively by appealing to their voter base, and this is another example I see where we've got Rishi Sunak has been accused of essentially giving in to the party and putting party before country. And I think the situation here, I mean, we've discussed before with GB News the human rights issues of the actual policy, but here now what we're seeing is basically a government saying that in certain circumstances it will be fine for ministers to ignore courts, so effectively abusing the rule of law. And I think that's a very, very slippery slope to go down. And I think that's one that is worrying many, many people. Only recently we saw the former Lord Chief Justice, and that's a Lord Chief Justice, someone who is in charge of the courts of England, not the Strasbourg courts, again saying that this is a very, very dangerous thing to do. It sets a very bad example. And I think this is one of the things that we need to really be concerned about.
That by saying they're very concerned that Strasbourg, the European Union, the ECHR has the power to overturn British law. But into the detail of this law, is it actually going to have any teeth? Because there is still a clause in this law, isn't there, that if people's lives are in imminent danger, then they will not be able to be deported. And surely that means a lot of people just say, well, my life is in imminent danger. Does this law have any fangs, or is it yet more posturing from the Tories?
Well, I think undoubtedly you're going to see more and more court hold-ups on this. Quite rightly, you've just said that law will include effectively a very similar phrase to what you need to use in the first place to install an Order 39 order. So you need to show effectively very similar language to that and to get that order from Strasbourg in the first place. So you're going to have two different situations, and I imagine that even if it does pass, which I'm sure it probably will eventually after it gets through the House of Lords, it is still going to get stuck in courts. But the point here is the danger, I think, of a government, any government, enabling ministers to set aside the rule of law if the minister decides, because where does that end? And I think that's the really concerning start. And when you've got former Lord Chief Justices standing up and saying this is not what we should be doing effectively, and this is a very slippery slope, that's something that I think all of us need to look at, because it's not just an issue of the human rights of the people coming into the country illegally. It's where could that possibly go? If we want to leave the European Court of Human Rights, then let's leave it. Let's not have one foot in and one foot out and ignore its orders when we choose to. Because what happens if that process then trickles down to our own courts here in England and the wider UK? I think it's a very dangerous slope to ignore the rule of law.
I mean, what's happening here, this is a bit of legal chicanery, isn't it, to try and circumnavigate the ECHR. But do you think that the British judicial system will go without a fight on this? We've seen in the past huge defences against Brexit, for example. How do you think the legal institution will take this? Have they still got some fight in them, David?
You're always going to see organisations that, as soon as if this law gets passed, you will see organisations, NGOs, certain types of human rights lawyers and immigration lawyers challenging it. You aren't going to see that. It's obviously what interpretation of that and the judgments that our English judges make. And it's going to get delayed. And I've said it before, I don't see any, if certainly not very many people going back to Rwanda or wherever it may be under these new policies. And I think the reality is, the Conservative Party know that. They are looking, this is about winning votes. This is about appeasing people probably ahead of the local elections. And I think realistically, knowing that we've got a general election coming, is this going to get through? And if it gets through, is it not really going to get stuck up in courts like Rwanda has? It's over a year since Rwanda now, and no one's gone there. So I think it is a lot of political gesturing. But if we pass it, it's a slippery slope, and we need to be very careful about that.